war going on for world dominance, for the absolute submission of the masses. How is this achieved? By the constant waging of war, by the introduction of the Federal Reserve Bank and central banks, by trafficking drugs, oil and people. The only two American presidents who tried to break down the power of the elite, beginning with the banks by printing their own interest-free, debt-free money, thus bypassing the Federal Reserve System, were Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. What else did they have in common? They got murdered. Now, why are the banks so important? What exactly is the Federal Reserve and its central banks? The Federal Reserve is the central bank system of the US. And in spite of the very misleading word federal, the Federal Reserve and all central banks around the world are privately owned. They are not government institutions. They are owned by some of the most wealthy and influential families in the world, two of which are close to the top of the power pyramid, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. The Federal Reserve was set up in 1913 after quite a bit of opposition from the US government and some very wealthy people such as Benjamin Guggenheim, from a very influential mining family, Isidor Straus, head of Macy's department stores and politician, and John Jacob Astor, businessman, inventor, and probably one of the wealthiest men at that time. The wealth of these three men in those days was approximately $500 million, which today would amount to something like 11 billion. These men were so rich they could not be bought, not by any bank. What else did they have in common? Apart from money, power, and opposing the creation of the US Federal Reserve? They all died on April 15, 1912, when the ship they traveled on hit an iceberg and disappeared in the cold ocean. Coincidence? Let's just say the Titanic disaster was highly convenient. The rest of the opposition was easily cornered. US Congress was bypassed. The Fed was created illegally, unconstitutionally, something not many people are aware of. Let's have a look at the visible top of the power pyramid. There we have the Rothschild family. In short, this family owns most of the world. They own each and every central bank. They own the Federal Reserve. They control the International Monetary Fund. They control the World Health Organization. They financed both parties of every war since the war against Napoleon. They financed the Bolshevik Revolution. They financed Hitler and the Nazis. They financed the production of IBM's punching machines for an efficient prosecution of the Jews by the Nazis. And they had equities in Exxon and IG Farben, the dealers of Zyklon B gas for the Nazi gas chambers. The estimated net worth of the Rothschild family is $500 billion. When you have that much money and power, you can poke the chest of the Crown Prince of Great Britain like he's your bitch. And when you oppose their power and try to stop them from taking over your banking system by setting up a central bank in your country that loans money to you at insane interest rates that you can never pay back, so that your country becomes the eternal slave to the Rothschild banking system, as happened to every country around the world, you are either ousted or killed. Your country will be invaded and blown to smithereens in the name of democracy, supported by the mainstream media that portrays you as a dictator. The same applies to those who refuse to accept the almighty US petrodollar. Oh, and there's much more, but we'll leave that for another time. The Rothschilds are not the only ones dominating the world. They are just part of the 1%, the elite. Another family of great influence are the Rockefellers. They made their initial fortune through oil. That fortune led to massive industrial influence. influence in American politics, the banking system, and the pharmaceutical industry. They founded schools and universities, leaving a huge imprint on what should and should not be taught to our children and students. The Rockefellers further expanded their tentacles of power into the medical world and into hospitals. They now own the Rockefeller University with its Academy of Medicine and the Academy of Sciences, the International Health Foundation, the American Cancer Society, the Drug Trust, the American Medical Association, and the FDA. Everything was in the hands of the Rockefellers. They further infiltrated the educational and medical system by means of the Rockefeller Foundation, giving grants to specific research programs such as the research and development of vaccines, for instance against Ebola, yellow fever, Zika, the flu, and Gardasil, which was further developed and promoted by billionaire and partner in crime Bill Gates. Every case of dangerous side effects such as miscarriage, autism, sterility, seizures, paralysis, and death was brought before the FDA and cleared. And all of the above was promoted by doctors and the media, where the Rockefellers had placed their representatives at the highest levels. Even presidents assured us it was safe. All use of alternative healing was demonized and prohibited, while the treatment with drugs and the drug dependency were pushed down the political agenda. The Rockefellers were also responsible for adding the toxic chemical waste product fluoride to our water and toothpaste. And as usual, the media spread lies about its healing qualities. No doctor or dentist ever tested its efficacy. They simply told their patients what they had been taught at the Rockefeller institutions. Yet another field of interest was the genetic manipulation of crops. The Rockefellers own millions of shares of Monsanto stock, as does their partner Bill Gates. Their mutual interest in eugenics, which aims at improving the genetic quality of the human population, will come as no surprise. Back in Nazi Germany, the Rockefellers financed the horrific eugenics experiments performed on Jewish people, trying to create a superior master race. So, in short, two very powerful families that rule the world and its population are the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And guess what? They are not even the most powerful. There are other families that exceed the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, both in money and in power. But I will not go any deeper into that at this stage. We'll save that for later, shall we? There's one more man I want to put in the limelight right now. George Soros, described by the mainstream media as investor and philanthropist. His net worth? $25 billion. Soros was born in Hungary. After World War II, he moved to England and then on to the US, where he made a fortune with his hedge funds and his merciless ways to manipulate the financial market, using crises to further increase his own wealth and expand his power. He prides himself in taking no responsibility for his actions and the destruction he caused to literally millions of people. I quote, "I am here to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do." Soros strikes me for his choice of funding. For example, NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. Their goal and their slogan, "Sex before 8 before it's too late." This is their mascot. Why does this great benefactor support a pedophile club such as NAMBLA? Then there's Antifa, the anti-fascist movement. When we look at their actions, we see nothing but violence. They show great resemblance with fascism, which is rather strange for an anti-fascist movement. Even one of their flags is weird in that sense. Why would anyone finance such a thing? The same goes for Black Lives Matter. Why sponsor a movement that pretends to be left-wing but shows nothing but riots and violence in practice? Do you want to know what we're dealing with here? Then follow me to part